One quiet evening, the old prospector sat on the wooden terrace of his cabin. Rusty lay beside him. The river flowed slowly in front of the house, reflecting the last golden light of the sunset. The mountains were calm. The forest was quiet. Only the soft sound of the water moving between the stones could be heard. The old man leaned back in his chair and looked toward the river. Even after so many years in the mountains, sunsets like this never became ordinary. Rusty lifted his head and watched the sky slowly change colors. Orange, red, then deeper shades of purple. The old man smiled slightly. "Beautiful evening, Rusty," he said quietly. The dog wagged his tail once and rested his head on the wooden floor. For a moment, everything felt peaceful. But the old man had something on his mind. On the small wooden table beside him lay an old leather notebook. Its cover was worn. The edges were cracked from years of use. This notebook had followed him through most of his life. It was his journal. Slowly, he reached over and opened it. The pages inside were yellow with age. Some of the writing had faded. Many pages contained memories from long ago. Stories from his younger days. Days when the mountains were still new to him. Days when he wasn't alone. Between the pages were old photographs. Faded images of campsites near the river. Pictures of men standing beside gold pans. Old smiles from people who had long since disappeared from the mountains. He slowly turned another page. And then another. Until something unusual caught his attention. In the middle of the journal there was a folded piece of paper. The old man paused. He didn't remember placing anything there. Carefully he unfolded the paper. It wasn't just a note. It was a map. An old hand-drawn map. The lines were rough, but the mountains were clearly marked. A river, a forest, and deep in the mountains a small symbol. A cave. The old man stared at it for a long moment. Then slowly the memory returned. This map hadn't been his. It had belonged to someone else. An old friend. Many years ago, they had once searched the mountains together. Both young. Both certain that somewhere in those hills there was a hidden deposit of gold. That friend had given him the map one evening beside the fire. He had said something strange that night. There are places in these mountains people don't know about. The old man had laughed back then. Everyone who searched for gold believed in hidden places. But a few weeks later that friend disappeared during an expedition. Some said he had fallen into the river. Others believed he had gotten lost deep in the forest. No one ever found him. After that day, the old man had never used the map again. He folded it and placed it inside his journal. Then he simply tried to forget. Years passed. The mountains changed. Friends came and went. But the map remained hidden. Until now. Rusty lifted his head and looked at the paper in the old man's hands. The dog seemed curious. The old man studied the map carefully. The cave was marked above the river. Somewhere deep in the pine forest. A place he had never explored. He leaned back in his chair. The sound of the river continued in the distance. Maybe it was just an old dream from the past. Maybe the map meant nothing. But sometimes the mountains keep their secrets for many years. And sometimes those secrets wait patiently, waiting for someone to return. Rusty slowly stood up and walked closer to the table. He sniffed the old paper, then looked at the old man. The old man chuckled quietly. "Well, Rusty, maybe it's time we finally see what this old map was pointing to." The sun had already disappeared behind the mountains. The forest was growing darker. Night was arriving. The old man folded the map carefully and placed it back inside the journal. But this time he didn't hide it. He kept it on the table. Tomorrow morning he would follow that map. Just to see what was out there. Maybe nothing. Maybe an old cave. Or maybe something that had been waiting in those mountains for a very long time. Rusty lay down again beside the chair. The river flowed quietly in the darkness. But somewhere deep in the forest a faint sound echoed between the trees. Like footsteps. Slow. Careful. As if someone was walking. Some mornings in the mountains begin with a strange kind of silence. The kind of silence that feels different. The forest is quiet. There is no wind. Even the birds haven't woken up yet. That morning was exactly like that. The first light of the sun was just touching the tops of the pine trees. A thin layer of mist slowly drifted above the river. I opened the door and stepped outside. My small wooden house stands near the river. I've been living here for many years. Rusty was already sitting near the door, as he always does. When he saw me, he slowly wagged his tail. "Another day begins, my friend," I said. I sat by the fire with a cup of coffee and looked once more at the old map on the table. I had found this map a few days earlier. It was old. The paper had turned yellow. The corners were torn. On the map there was a mark somewhere in the mountains. A cave symbol. Maps like this are sometimes real. Sometimes they are only legends. But when you live in the mountains, you learn to pay attention to every sign. I grabbed my shovel, flashlight, and bag. Rusty immediately stood up. He follows me everywhere I go. "Come on," I said. "Today we're going to see something interesting." We walked up the forest trail. The morning air was cold. Sunlight filtered through the trees. Some parts of the path were easy. Others were difficult. Fallen trees, loose rocks, steep slopes. At one point Rusty ran ahead. But suddenly, I heard a loud sound, like soil collapsing. I stopped immediately. "Rusty!" I ran forward. That's when I saw it. A large pit in the ground. And Rusty was inside it. The pit was deep. Rusty started barking from below. I understood right away. If I jumped down there too, neither of us might be able to get out. So I looked around. There were fallen trees nearby. Among them was a large rotten log. I dragged it toward the pit. Took time. The log was heavy. But finally I managed to place it across the edge. "Rusty, come." Rusty jumped toward the log. He slipped a few times. But finally he climbed up. As soon as he got out, he ran straight to me. Patted his head. "See, my friend," I said. "Today won't be an easy road." We continued walking. The forest became thicker. The trail narrowed. After some time we reached a massive rock wall. And right in the middle of it was the dark mouth of a cave. Cold air flowed out from inside. Rusty stopped for a moment. He stared into the cave, then carefully stepped inside. I turned on my flashlight and followed him. The cave was cold. The rocks were wet. Drops of water slowly fell from the ceiling. Every step echoed through the darkness. We walked for several minutes. Then suddenly the cave opened up. In front of us stood a large cliff. I pointed my light downward, and my heart almost stopped. Below the cliff, there was a lake, a hidden lake inside the cave. The water was perfectly still, like a mirror. The ceiling of the cave opened high above like a dome. Through that opening sunlight was pouring down. The light shimmered across the lake like gold. I looked around carefully, but my experience told me something immediately. There was no gold here. Gold is usually found in rivers. But here there was no current, no black sand, no quartz veins. This was not a gold deposit. I stood there looking at the water. Then suddenly, splash, a sound came from the center of the lake. Rusty immediately lifted his ears. Ripples formed on the surface. But I hadn't thrown anything. A few seconds later, another sound. This time from the other side of the lake. Rusty growled quietly. A low humming sound echoed through the cave. Like an echo, but not quite. Something seemed to move beneath the water. I pointed my flashlight toward the lake. But the light couldn't reach the bottom. The water was too dark. That's when I realized something. This wasn't just a lake. Maybe there was a tunnel beneath it. Inside mountains there are underground rivers. Sometimes they run through caves. Maybe this lake was connected to one of them. But standing there I realized something else too. This was not a place to explore alone. If there was a tunnel down there, someone would have to go underwater. And that required equipment. Ropes, extra lights, safety gear. Rusty looked at me. I scratched behind his ears. "We'll come back here," I said. "But next time we'll be prepared. Maybe with a few trusted friends." We'll find out what lies beneath this lake. We slowly left the cave. Sunlight hit our eyes again. The forest felt alive. Birds were singing. The wind whispered through the trees. But before leaving, I turned around one last time. The dark entrance of the cave stood silently in the rock. Inside it, the hidden lake remained. And beneath that lake, there might be a secret tunnel. But to learn the truth, we would have to return. We left the cave as the sun was already sinking behind the mountains. The forest became quiet again. But my thoughts were still inside that cave. The sound from the lake, the movement under the water, the strange echo. I had never seen anything like it. Rusty still seemed uneasy too. He kept sniffing the air around the forest. After walking a few steps, I stopped. When you live in the mountains long enough, you learn something. If nature gives you a sign, you shouldn't ignore it. I looked back once more. The cave entrance could still be seen in the distance. Then suddenly Rusty barked loudly. I froze. What is it? Rusty stared toward the cave. His ears raised, his fur standing slightly. Then from deep inside the cave, a faint sound echoed again. Like wind. But not wind. For a moment it sounded like water moving. The echo rolled through the mountain. A chill ran down my back. It didn't sound like falling rocks. It sounded like something moving. But we were already outside. I looked at Rusty and said quietly, "That's enough for today, my friend. We'll come back." We continued walking down the trail. The sun was slowly setting. Orange light filled the forest. Then Rusty suddenly stopped again. This time he didn't bark. He sniffed the ground. I stepped closer. There were footprints. But not animal tracks. Human footprints. Old ones. Partly washed away by rain. But still visible. Someone had been here before. I looked around. The forest was quiet. But one thing was clear. We were not the first to find that cave. Maybe years ago, other prospectors had come here too. Then another thought crossed my mind. The map. Old maps are never made for no reason. If someone marked that cave, they must have seen something there. Maybe the lake. Maybe the tunnel. Or maybe something else. We kept walking. After a while, I heard the familiar sound of the river. That meant we were close to home. The sky had turned deep red. When we reached the cabin, I lit a fire. Rusty lay down beside it as usual. But that evening felt different. I spread the map out on the table again. And this time I noticed something I hadn't seen before. Next to the cave mark, there was a small line. I brought the map closer to the lamp. The line went beneath the cave, then deeper into the mountain. I suddenly understood. If the map was right, there really could be a tunnel beneath that lake. And that tunnel might lead somewhere deep inside the mountain. Rusty lifted his head and looked at me. I smiled. "We're going back there, my friend. But next time we'll be ready." That night I couldn't sleep for a long time. The sounds from the cave stayed in my mind. The movement in the lake. The strange mark on the map. The old footprints. Then I realized something. This was no longer just about gold. It was about discovering a secret hidden inside the mountain. And some secrets wait for years in places where no one expects them. I looked at the fire one last time. Rusty was sleeping quietly. But I knew one thing for sure. We would return to that cave.